I'm going to tell you the story of when I went to interview Gordon Brown when he was Prime Minister of Great Britain and how greatly I fucked it up. I am late to interview the Prime Minister. Of course I'm not going to be late to interview Gordon Brown. Don't be ridiculous. He's the Prime Minister of Great Britain, for God's sake. I'm going to leave the house at 11:30 a.m. 11:30, my husband says. He looks alarmed. He is, in general, an anxious man. He keeps sachets of Heinz tomato ketchup in his wallet, unable to bear the possibility of being boxed into a situation where Daddy's tomato ketchup might be the only option. The interview's 12:30. You must order a cab for 10:15. I am not going to take a cab to Downing Street. In the event of Gordon Brown asking me how I arrived, I want to say I travelled on the underground transportation system of London, England, like the people do. I'm not quite sure what point I would be making by saying this, but it feels like it might be an important one, something I could score highly for. At 11:15, I go up to my office to print out my 62 carefully planned questions. I approach the printer with great serenity. In the past, the printer and I have had an enmity that has stretched back over generations. I ended its grandmother when the cartridge jammed halfway through printing a map out. Its mother was abandoned to free cycle after every functionality, save black and white photocopying, failed. But this HP PhotoSmart C480 will not let me down. It's like Britain and France. We have finally come to an understanding. There will be antagonism and murder between us no more. 19 minutes later, I am pulling every wire out of the back of the motherfucking goddamn betraying piece of bullshit and screaming. What do you mean the cartridge alignment sheet has not been detected? What does that mean? I'm supposed to be interviewing the Prime Minister. I've missed my train and I order a cab. Already it's very, very clear that when the controller said, yes, we have cars free, what he meant was, yes, we have cars free. Free to do whatever they like. Play in the sun. Drive round around the park really slowly. Sit and enjoy the sheer joy of North London. I go and stand out in the street. It is now 40 minutes until I start talking to Gordon Brown, the Prime Minister of Great Britain. I am in a totally deserted residential area. When a learner driver crawls down the road in her silver AA driving school car, I think I'm interviewing the Prime Minister. That probably means I'm legally entitled to flag down that car and get her to drive me to at least Archway Tube Station. When the cab finally pulls up, it is an old, battered minivan. I realise with horror that it very closely resembles the van that the Iranian terrorists shoot Doc from in Back to the Future. It has curtains inside which are drawn. It looks like an Acme suicide bomb. It does not look like the kind of thing that the policeman on the gates of Downing Street will feel relaxed about. As we screech off towards town, the cab driver and I quickly come to an understanding with each other. I am the delusional, sweaty woman who keeps saying, I have to interview the Prime Minister of Great Britain in 38 minutes. He is the man who will cause my death when he says, I don't know where Downing Street is. This is, I admit, difficult information for me to process. On the one hand, I'm alarmed that a cab driver doesn't know where 10 Downing Street, one of the most famous addresses in the world, is. On the other hand, I don't either, really. Is it near the Strand? I have terrible anxious cottonmouth. There is a litre of water in my handbag and I drink it. Emotionally, the template I'm relating to in this situation is the 1986 film Clockwise, starring John Cleese, who plays a man battling to reach an appointment on time despite a series of strokes of ill fortune. This alternates from being useful to not useful. On the one hand, Cleese did eventually make that appointment on time. On the other hand, he arrived cut and bruised in a monk's habit, with only one shoe, having had his speech eaten by a goat. It's not really a possibility I want to consider. I abandon the cab at Euston and run onto the Victoria line, onto the Jubilee line, and then down to Whitehall. It is 12:28 p.m. By now, the litre of water that I drank in the cab is having its unfortunate yet inevitable consequence. I have to ask myself, is the Pulitzer Prize for Journalism enough recompense for having turned up at Downing Street having wet myself? It is not, and so I downgrade my running to a fraught trot. course, when I finally get there, Gordon Brown is running 20 minutes late. Of course he is. My cardigan is, I realise, soaked with sweat. I am still stuffing it into my handbag when he finally comes into the room. Prime Minister, I say, standing up. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for agreeing to this interview. That evening, I hand-wash the cardigan. As I pull it out of the bag, I notice that it smells odd, intense. That is the smell of fear, I think to myself, holding it up to my nose. That is the smell that humans emit when they are at the limits of their terror. Then I look into my handbag and realise that it is not the smell of fear. It is actually the smell of a burst-free sample of Fructis hair serum. And that I still don't really know what the smell of fear is.